America, the land of the free. But who did this land really belong to? Before the borders, before the settlement, before the so-called discovery? The answer is simple: Native Americans. Yet, despite history, their land was stolen, their rights ignored, and their voice silenced. Watch out, pay attention, and I will share my thought later.
The United States government is offering you a piece of land of your own.
We have our own land.
No, it's not yours. It's the U.S. government's.
Did they buy it?
No.
Did they trade for it?
It's not like that.
Then how can they own it?
He has a point.
We will give you everything you need if you will just submit to living on a reservation. If you accept our offer, you won't have to hunt buffalo anymore or roam the prairie. You can depend on your country to take care of you.
You are not my country.
Breaking news. The Trump administration questions Native Americans' birthright citizenship in court. The Trump administration argued in court to limit birthright citizenship for certain groups of people here in the United States. Part of their argument involved questioning whether Native Americans, who are citizens of their own tribal nations, qualified for U.S. citizenship under the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment, which was ratified in 1868, states that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are United States citizens. This basically means that anyone born on U.S. soil automatically is a United States citizen. However, the Trump administration is focused on one phrase of the 14th Amendment: subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And they argue that not everyone born in the United States qualifies as subjects to the jurisdiction of the United States. The Justice Department cited the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which was ratified 2 years prior to the 14th Amendment, and is one of the earliest laws that defines citizenship. What's interesting about this is that it excludes two groups of people from citizenship. The first is subject to a foreign power and Indians not taxed. Historically, the United States government treated all Native Americans as belonging to separate nations and not to the United States. And that all changed in 1924 with the passage of the Indian Citizenship Act, which granted all Native Americans in the United States citizenship. The Trump administration is arguing that the 14th Amendment should still exclude Native Americans because we are still subjects to a foreign power, which is our tribal nations, and they are citing a Supreme Court case that was decided in 1884 that stated that Native Americans are not U.S. citizens unless they denounce their allegiance to their tribes. This is very controversial because the United States government and tribal nations have a long-standing agreement stating that Native Americans can have dual citizenship with the United States government and with our tribes. And the arguments that the Trump administration is trying to make will undermine all of this and throw away hundreds of years of treaties and negotiations that allow us to have our tribal sovereignty today. In addition to that, the 1884 Supreme Court case that decided that Native Americans are not U.S. citizens unless they renounce their tribal allegiance was basically deemed useless after the passage of the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924.
Your ignorance! Do not be blind to your naiveness! What you see is the truth! It took all of this to prove to you that we are still here! We are not going nowhere! You are watching the direct action! Understand the circumstances of trouble! Understand the liberation of our people! It is in your mind! The United States tried to erase our people, but we're still here. In the land, on the trail of truth, right from San Francisco to D.C. Respect us or expect us. Trail of truth. Stand back. Free, let it fall. Tear all political prisoners. Okay, we're moving. Straight. How far? Keep on. You want
I am so upset that the things we did and the things we fought for and the boys that died for it, it's all gone down the drain. Our country's gone to hell in a handbasket. We haven't got the country we had when I was raised. Not at all. Nobody will have the fun I had. Nobody will have the opportunity I had. This is not the same. That's not what our boys, that's not what they died for. This is not it.
But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
We have all heard the story Christopher Columbus discovered America, but how can you discover a land that was already home to millions of people? Long before European arrival, indigenous nations thrived, from the Cherokee in the southeast to the Lakota in the plain to the Navajo in the southwest. They had government, economics, spiritual system, and thriving communities. The idea that America was an empty land waiting to be claimed is one of history's biggest lies. So how did this land go from native hands to European settlers? The answer: violence, genocide, and deception. The US government signed hundreds of treaties with native nations, promising land and sovereignty, only to break nearly every single one. From the Trail of Tears, where thousands of Cherokee were forced to march and die, to the Wounded Knee Massacre, native history is filled with tragedy and betrayal. And despite the suffering, Native Americans continue to fight for their land and their right. Today, a powerful movement is rising. Land back. Native communities are demanding the return of sacred land and the right to govern themselves without interference. And progress is happening. Tribes have reclaimed land in places like South Dakota and Oklahoma. But the fight is not over. From Standing Rock to Arc Flats, Native people are still resisting government and corporate land grabs. The message is clear. This land was never given away. It was stolen, and stolen land should be returned. Returning land to Native people is not just about justice, it is about survival. Indigenous communities have protected their land for centuries, and studies show that Native-led conservation efforts are some of the most effective ways to fight climate change. The wisdom and tradition of indigenous people offer solutions to a world struggling with environmental destruction. This is why the land back movement matters, not just for Native Americans, but for all of us.